It's been a long time that the Schubert's last sonata travels with me. It's been a very good companion. It reveals itself like seasons, in different ways, as well as the piece itself always revealed itself to me first as its own seasons, like first movement autumn, second movement winter, third movement spring, and fourth movement summer. I wasn't taught that. It was something that I felt, heard and smelled and perceived from this opening first movement, which carries in itself the traction of the summer, but already the slowing down of the autumn and the regret of the summer and the nostalgia for the summer, but already has this sad song like a tear with a smile. That would be, in a symbolism way, the old age. And then winter would be when the trees are lost their leaves, and you hear this funeral march for Beethoven, which he wrote first, skeletal and bare. Rebirth of nature. The trees have new flowers, new leaves. And then after this elegant and gracious opening of nature back to life, after the still moment of the winter, comes the summer with its excesses. Like a big laugh. Of course, in the beginning there is... modulation in G-flat major, later in minor, which is a lure because it's not minor, it's just A major. These changes of weather while the narration goes on the beautiful landscape reminds me a lot of Winterreise or any of these narrative walks. And Schubert is very good at narrating and singing with this melodic gift that is unforgivable. Sometimes complex harmonies are very striking, and sometimes even mind-boggling, and sometimes just so charming, like Chopin. Neapolitan sixth tonality as a hope that will not happen, and then returning to the dramatic and sad chromatic E-flat minor. But yes, the harmonies are the mood of the piece. Whenever the melody is the soul, the heart, the eyes that never age. Young child, old grandpa or grandma, the eyes are the fires fireplaces of the soul. You feel like the eyes are always there, curious, open, and receiving and projecting the gaze. And I always find that with the age, having played often this last B-flat major sonata, this open eyes of Schubert. Even if I see the leaves fall, I sing the song. And this melody, the harmonies are more simple, so to say, rather obvious rather than simple. They don't clog the simplicity, the graceful melodic line. And then there is this embedded heart pulse, the fastinato, subtly pulsing inside. You have the bass and the tenor with the soprano in sixth. So you do have a song of dialogue, and a dialogue of two songs or two singers singing the same in tender sixths or thirds. This F is repeated. Is repeated like Mozart repeats often in symbolism of death notes in the String Quartet 421. In the Cantata 8, When Will I Die, titled. The repeated note is always the symbol of death in most of the early composers. I don't know for sure that this is here. I think it's more like the permanence of things compared to the changes of things. So we hold on it, but it's embedded inside. It's not a ostinato as we find often in the bottom. Liszt or in Beethoven. Or in most music is in the left hand, in the rhythm, in the pulse, in the bass, in the ground. Here the ostinato in Schubert is inside. It's not. Even in the development, the melody is on top. Like the opening of the abyss. Unlike all these eighth notes that are measured, almost organized and well behaved, then this is unmeasurable, unbehavable. It's like the abyss. Oh my God, I don't want to drop there. And it's in minor compared to the major. Smile. Is it in minor, just very briefly at the end, but not really. And then you have the fact that the melodies and the thematical materials are divided into two kinds for their pulse. The kind that starts with an upbeat, that ends on the downbeat, and the types that are decisively on the downbeat starting. Downbeatish melodies like... development. European, as if to say that Schubert is really European, Czech, Hungarian, also Austrian and German composer. The tradition of the Western European music is with an upbeatish melody that always starts on an upbeat to a downbeat, to land on a downbeat. Which gives that graceful lightness of rebouncing. It's not, obviously, or. But there is a tradition in Eastern Europe, mostly in Russia, in music, that we can hear very clearly with the Russian composers of the latter part of the 19th century, with Mussorgsky, always downbeat. Or, not that it's, well, you can find examples to prove your point in any direction, but there is a leaning towards a downbeat start, which gives this sense of settlement or decisiveness. Whenever the upbeat departure is always, would you like, can I come, would you like, can I come? It's always an invitation rather than an assumption. And Schubert has a first theme with upbeat, which makes it so tender and elegant and gentle. Whenever the second idea purposely downbeatish with a long and two shorts, very square, and the ambivalence, the contradiction, the completion of the contrasting pulses of these two themes gives such a richness to the material in the development. And I think that this is what he was intending to do, in order to create a sense of well-being towards the end with the triplets which decorate this second theme. So, with the theme in the left hand, with the downbeat, and but the decorative triplets almost like vain moments of passing happiness, almost childish, inconsequent. Very often interrupted in the midst of it, like lost in your thoughts. And each one brings me further into dark thoughts, and then immediately going out. As if to reassure the audience, oh yes, everything will finish well at the end. Even flying up like birds and having a little aria. In fact, in this first movement, this autumnal, I think, narration of a story, he takes his time to tell the story, and he starts with this phrase which goes to the third and doesn't finish, but by a question. What do you think? He does that in the C minor first moment musical. Just alone, without accompaniment, is not. Like in the sonata. But then he has this symphonic empty octave which he uses in the finale of the sonata. But in the first moment musical, he orchestrates it or harmonizes it. also harmonized. But it's more subtle in the texture because of the pulsing F, the parallel 6, the tenderness, the B flat ostinato of the bass holding, also get drawn. And the phrase, oops, sorry, unveils itself. And there is always this diminished seventh chord that comes to darken the well-being. To make a striking modulation. It always seems like this passing through minor keys is always to go out into major at the end and prevail. So the dark moment is not really a sad moment. Of course, being not a pianist, he doesn't help pianists by asking them to play the emotional expression with the pinky and the fourth, which are so unindependent from the rest of the fingers, and the repeated notes of the accompaniment ostinato in the same hand, in the heavy fingers, would have been so much more practical if... But of course he's not here to help the pianist. He writes as a string quartet or symphony. So you have the two elements. And all this in F sharp minor with a sad smile. So we have to practice a lot the evenness of the repeated notes. But the repeated notes which don't repeat ta 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 ta, each note from the above to the bottom of the key, but from inside the key, inside down. So it's like ha 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 ha. Repeating the repeated notes in the escapement and pick it up to replay while halfway up without pedal. Already connects. Ha 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 ha. Compared to if it was entirely replayed. Or, of course, it takes time to practice to control the amount of lifting, but it naturally organizes the layers, and it creates a sense of symphonic playing rather than just dynamic contrasts. So it's more about textures. Different textures rather than dynamics. Besides the fact it's triplets repeated, and here it's nothing repeated, so obviously you have two melodies, triplets and a bass, but you have to follow them at the same time. And the contradictory beauty in Schubert's songwriting is that the melody in the soprano, in the top part, is uplifting, going up third, always wanting to elevate itself, like to catch something bright and beautiful. And then the accompaniment is with the secondary voice, based on the lamented drop of the third, but with a passing tone. So this third ascends directly, and this third's drop by passing tone, as if a sigh. And very often pianists verticalize the two in order to simplify the independence of it, and we hear, or, so the top should rise and the bottom should drop independently. And the middle should repeat inside the notes, in order to allow the melody to be heard and not to have to rise everything louder. It's the reason I compare it a lot in my imaginary vision of it as an autumn, for instance, or just the season, because it's not just the wind, it's also the rain, it's possibly also the branches noise of the trees, it's just nature, its smell, its ways. That's why it's not just one thing, it's not a melody or an accompaniment, it's two melodies and an inside accompaniment and a bass line, and the two go in two directions. Minor section in major, a first attempt, a major but not, yes but not, back to B minor, and you go out through D minor, almost summer. Like the narrator comes in and says B flat major will be the trade to return to F major, the dominant, in major. So when we passed in minor, it was in order to extract out of there in F major. At the end of the exposition, since it's a dominant, but in major compared to minor. And at the end, major, since in the recap we do the second theme in the first key. Sorry for this note. Important, essential, quintessential in Schubert's narrative storytelling, as a pianist in this case for the last sonata, is to not overreact to each change of mood that the harmonization brings you, from the smiley B flat major to the dark diminished seventh chord, and then return to smile. Keep it inside and just look, gaze forward, and let the harmonies create that change of mood through the continuity of the melodic line, which is your thread. If not, it becomes too distracted and distracting and yes, reactive, but oversensitive to too many elements of nature, which is more for the impressionism or the symbolism to come, when you have the slightest movement of wind of the keys, like in Debussy compared to in the reflections of water. Not that it's more sensitive to play the impressionists in music, but I think here we have to be more narrative, because there is a meaning to the sense of the storytelling, even if it goes through different loops and turns and happiness and sadness harmonically. The melodic line should be our guide, as if there is a story to be told, and not to take too much, just enough. Let the music itself create it. Keep the integrity of the line, the meaning of the things, not just play with the colors of them, but for the sake of it, of course, not only. That's when you finish and you go almost in a revolt. Center for intimacy. For the coda he goes into a 5 of 2 C minor. These harmonies are heartwarming, as if reassuring in front of the winter to come. And the last call of the same first theme comes in the 6/4 position. Mozart in the end of his operas has always done. Goodbye, farewell, in the Trizzettino from Così. And here, the 6/4 is always the standby for the tonic. Distant echo of the abyss, unmeasured but evacuated, back in major. And how Schubert spaces the last chords as if they interrupt the silences rather than the sounds prevailing. Silence, 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 and then silence. As if there is a ritenuto by the spacing of the silences rhythmically established by him that we don't have to add to it. The winter is the dark but also the deep. When Schubert and his friends gathered after 1827's funeral of Beethoven, which was a major event in Vienna, he toasted in some cafe with his friends and hoped for the next one among them, because he knew himself was condemned by the disease, but he was hoping, hopefully, not to die from it. And he wrote this funeral music for Beethoven, according to what I was told. And then wrote a sonata in the last months of his life, the next year, 1828, with the 3 movements around it, which is mostly why perhaps C-sharp minor is the unexpected key for this slow movement. The B-flat major sonata should have had the slow movement in G minor, if it was in a relative minor, to take an easy, cheesy example of what could have been, should have been, and thankfully wasn't. So C-sharp minor is the key for this introspective movement, which has the accompaniment of pizzicati, like in a double cello quintet also, and a chorale of the melody by 2 parts, or the length of sound that the piano produces is just unbelievable because of the playful contrast between the depth of the rests and the silence of the rests, but these pregnant rests, and then the interrupted sounds that come like drops. And for the tempo, it's a very difficult thing to do. When you're young, you think depth of meaning means also time you take to express it. So you can play very slow. You learn with age that the depth and the profound feeling of calm and peaceful and introspective mood, it doesn't have to do with the pace itself. It's to do with the evenness on the lake surface, or it has to be so mirrory. And I find that if you play faster tempo, faster paced, or less slow rather, I don't want to play on words, but the fact is that if it's even on the surface, it can be walking forward and still keep that calm. Therefore, it could be more andante than adagio, like this. The first thing that makes it difficult is the repeated note. Because on the piano, you cannot repeat it other than letting the keys lift reasonably high, hopefully not entirely, to replay them. If not, you won't replay. And if it's too high, it replays too brightly, too ta-ta, too clearly, and then it lacks that melodic repeated note. If it was... But it's to do also with the decay of the long first note of the sound, and then pick it exactly where it dropped to rise it. Then on the third beat is already lower. So it's if you say, I would like to tell you how much I love you. And inevitably, so it's always cheesy to put words on sounds. Sounds are beautifully distinguished because they don't need to explain. They just are. So they speak to the psyche directly without even to pass by the word. But we can make our own inner film. Be it as it is, the repeated note has to repeat inside the key again. To be ta-ha. Then the next high note fully played from above, and then the termination softer. And then bridge to the 5 of 4, which is a bare, cold, factually painful triton with nothing around. And the third is soothingly resolving it. And this last one, high C sharp, is repeated note and a melodic note. But the same key for the accompaniment and for the melody. And then from far away, here I suggest to have the resolutions of the triads in 6/4 position instead of diminuendo like in the beginning, rather than crescendo, as a questioning and not tension release, but tension retention. To go further up, to the painful minor ninth. Sorry. And then the change of sky, it is a sunshine. But it's only what the music is, regardless of anything I say. So of course, if I stretch it so slow, I lose the meaning of the word because it's so stretched, even if the sound of the length of sound of the modern piano allows that. If I were to play the same theme for the sake of the phrasing faster, it will be... listening it without any trouble, because the pacing of the group of phrases is very natural. It's like, if I start playing, it's much more difficult to be natural or spontaneous or just obvious, as it should be. So in order to maintain the obviousness of the phrase, it shouldn't be overly slow, in order to maintain a sensible way of natural path. Paced. In the middle section, he goes into A major, deep in the keyboard, like a brass quartet or male chorus kind of chorale. With a nice lastinato. La 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 la. He has of the he makes of the spacing, because the melody, it's in the center of the opening theme. The beginning of the middle section is deep, bright but dark. Bright but dark. Bright in the mood, but dark in the range. And in echo he has the same statement retaken this time in the aria or lead setting. It sounds like any of his most beautiful, simply ingenious songs, and it lightens up the atmosphere from that. Sound. It's almost like as if he took one of the nursery songs of the area and adapted it on the piece. It's so uncomplicatedly touching, not chromatic, not anything, just 151 in A major. Just, nothing is just, but anyway, that is my opinion, at least that's how I see it. And then you have that return that is so different from the first time, because this time the accompaniment has this extra ostinato partial, which contrasts with the length of sound of the melody, like some kind of voice of consciousness. It's time to die, but you still sing your song. He goes into major, in C major, could be even softly played, or at the end in C sharp original key major, not victoriously happy in major, more relieved and ready to go after the sufferance. So it leaves you with a sense of accomplishment, that you have gone through the pain and into the redemption, into perhaps the release of all this pain, into eternity. And when it's finished, you feel like half of the sonata is gone, as well as so much of the melodic themes of the first movement. The second movement, and then out of the silence, literally, of the slow movement's end, is that rebirth of Mother Nature, but very, very softly, nano, nano. And then you have a little bit of playfulness, almost as if you awaken, you start rebelieving in this rebirth of nature. It's not just an illusion, as it was the first time when you come out from the slow movement, and in the repeat it becomes more and more playful, and I would say even almost daring. And the B section of the trio of this minuet scherzo is the B-flat minor hemiola accompaniment. Which contrasts so well. And it's important to play staccato from inside the key, almost as if you pull the key and then you settle on the next one. 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Again, the ostinato, this time the fastinato is in the top, and the melody, the thirds in the middle. should be whispered distantly. And sometimes the happiness doesn't need explanation, it just is jubilationally bright, compared to the length of this first movement that has to tell the story and the sorrow of this forever going on false week, month and months, and it sort of lingers until the leaves become yellow and red and dead. And then the slow movement, this kind of startled moment of emptiness. And then the reawakening of nature. Brings us to the last movement, which starts with an interruption, as if it's a theatrical call. At the end he even drops that call, but in the beginning he maintains it on G, like attention, careful, like horn. B flat major, but G. He could have started on the dominant of B flat major, but he's playfully starting it on the secondary dominant, that is 5 of 2, C minor in F in B flat. I mean, who cares what it is? It sounds like medicine. I just wanted to say that the playfulness of it is that you start on the wrong note, or seemingly so. You're being pitchy, you're being playful, you're being cunning. To play without to talk, but I like to share my ideas and hopefully my suggestions that could help the ideas of others, since there isn't one single way to do it, thankfully. One thing which strikes me the most is this childish happiness that comes out of this fourth movement, as if all these complex chromaticisms and are all erased. And I like to think of that for the summertime, because somehow, like when the sun shines just straight brightly, it's no shadows, everything is just there openly. And this kind of genuine happiness is a relief from all these intentions and some tensions of the earlier movements. That's how I see it. And of course, when it has repeated notes, it's almost the call of death of the opening. But it's no more that, it's more like a call of excitement. So we have this difficult following section, which brings us to his best art of writing songs. In long values, the melody is basically a scale, but then inside the whispering of falling water, like cascades, but very soft, and the upbeat, almost pizzicato of double bass. Of it brings it in today's terms jazzily, because it's offbeat, to be constantly bouncing. Imagine for a nanosecond the horrible situation if he had written the bass on the beat. Compared to himself until he reaches minor. I'm convinced this is the Appassionata, because it's exactly F minor, not to mention, but also, and also the chordal aspects of he does his Beethoven. Napolitan seeks to sharpen the edges. As usual, coming out of the drama, Sturm und Drang of that stereotyped, but nevertheless right, Schubertian understanding that he likes to do this striking contrast for a short time of storming, soulful storming, and then comes the well-being, and of course from 16th notes he goes to triplets, compared to, which is so much embedded in the DNA of the Appassionata by Beethoven, which obviously he didn't ignore. And he did a borrowing. It's nothing to do with imitation, because he couldn't invent something else. It's just that I think it's his homage as well. And also to the fact that they all have the common grounds, after all. The ingredients in the kitchen are the same. It's what you cook that makes it different. And sometimes it can have reminiscences. Oh, it reminds me of this. But nevertheless, Beethoven hardly has these moments of graceful smile after the drama like Schubert. Back home to re-explore the same theme. This accompaniment is very difficult on the piano because it's simple. If it's well played, it's obvious. If it's badly played, it's horrendously heavy. So nobody knows the quality that it demands, except that you have to model it to the right hand's lightness. Like elegance, you don't have to be elegant, you are or you aren't. And I think this accompaniment has to be rebouncing and discreet. And part of the fun of the right hand and it's easier said than done, as always, those simple things that appear simple, but they're essential. And not only the affected moment where, of course, one can argue the different types of difficulty, but in terms of subtlety, that is the one of more difficult things in Schubert, is the simple things that seem obvious when they're well done, and horrendously heavy when they're not well done. And he goes several times back to this projection of happiness. The more he repeats it in the rondo form, the more we are in disbelief that is really but a facade. And then when the real development comes after A, B, A, C, A, before the D, A, we get lost way away from our original key. He does 3 times. He returns in B flat major. Instead of staying there where it's home, he continues to drift. dominant of C minor, which is a second degree. And then here he starts. I think by the time in the recap we have the song in the original key. By the way, in the parenthesis needs also very subtle pedaling, because the melody has to be alone before the bass, which retro clears, it leads backwards the harmony that just happened. D flat, D minor, E flat major, G minor, D flat major, and D minor, but you don't know it until it comes. And then inside, little whisper. Make sure that the melodic line is 5 and 4, is well supported by the palm in order to not be stiff by the arm, and allow for strength of precision for the melodic line to be broadcasted without any darkness, just brightly into the ear of the listener. And not 5, 5, 5, 5 sliding with pedal. Because then everything is smeary. Instead of this, 5, 4, 5, 4 with substitutions allows to almost do 2 hands in one. And then so many episodes in this rondo, not unusual for a rondo, but always returning to the theme obsessively. And the last time he starts drifting in the horn call at the beginning. And then finally on the dominant. Call before the final few bars, where he storms the ending. Sorry, and this great moment of full happiness, joy without restriction. He has this. Thought about, but every time I played that section in my life so far, it seems like the last si, do, do, so, sol, fa, fa, re englobes all the sonata before in a blink of an eye, like all these things we lived, all the things we hoped, all the things we had, all the things we lost, all the things we wished, all the things we longed, everything is just gone. He was part of all this story, isn't it? Like the storyteller closing the book. It is interrupted, as if you're daydreaming and for a moment startled in your daydream before to finish. A bit like in the first very movement after the opening statement. Beautifully enigmatic, if not understood right away, as a statement of perhaps already goodbye at the opening. In the chord of the first movement, the same, as I said earlier, chord for the 6/4, but here is in the tonic. So it's more settled and grounded with a dominant ostinato, but then you had that trill. That kind of abyss that is almost the mirror of happiness down in the darkness, and you try to avoid seeing it. I don't want to know you're coming. Death, I don't want to see you come. It's there, but maintained in a distant rumble, and back to the sunshine. So at the very end of 40 minutes later, the fourth movement, I think it's interrupted. interruption is also part of an almost echo trill. I would have heard it. Slow movement, or as if all comes to a halt. All this emotional life, all this life itself comes to a halt. And then in a last burst of energy, you just erupt. And delays 4 and 5 before 1. What a journey. Thank you.